So I want you to think about this morning, if there's a time in your life where you feel like you were just betrayed by somebody that you trusted. Anybody ever experienced anything like that before? What was that like? How does that feel when that happens?
Hurt.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like your best friend or something like that.
Well, you can't be betrayed unless you're close to them, right?
That's
I mean, when somebody I don't know does something, it's not a betrayal. I may not like it, but it's not a betrayal. So yeah, that makes the hurt extra deep. Anybody else?
Might feel kind of dumb, like maybe you should have seen it coming.
Yeah, like
You should have been so trusting.
Naive, feel like, yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
I kind of associate it to like with sports. Sometimes the guy goes to the other team or something. You're like,
You're thinking about Freddie Freeman right now.
I'm thinking about Freddie Freeman.
And he had left yet, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. Yeah, I mean it's hard when that happens. It feels like your whole world, everything you believed about yourself, that person, that relationship, is just coming down around you, because we all want people who we can trust, people who are loyal to us, people who we know are going to stick with us through thick and thin. But really those kinds of people are few and far between. We have relationships come and go in our lives, and when the tough gets going, there are a lot of people who also get going with it. And so that's especially hard in church, I think, because you expect more of people in church, right? You expect that in church those people won't let me down because they're believers. But the fact is that churches are full of people. And people are messed up and broken in church just like they are outside of church. So that makes it hard. But this morning I want you to see that Jesus is looking for people who are going to stick with him. Stick with him to the end no matter what. And so as we walk through Jesus' final conversation with his disciples in chapters 13 through 16 of John tonight, we're going to see on that night before the crucifixion, Jesus dealing with this same idea, people who weren't loyal to him, someone who betrayed him, someone who was going to deny him before the night was over. And we're going to see what Jesus says about that, and we're going to talk about what it means for us. So last week we saw him wash the disciples' feet. We saw him talk about how they should follow his example through service and humility. And today we're going to see the disciples' response to that act. Especially two of them, okay? Even as Jesus is serving them, they're going to turn their backs on him. We're going to see Judas and Peter, what they do, and what happened to both of them. And I think it's going to force us to ask some questions about ourselves. How loyal are you to the one who saved you? Okay, so let's look at that. Let's start by reading verses 21 through 30 of John chapter 13 this morning. Somebody want to read that for me?
I'll read it.
When Jesus had said this, he was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples started looking at one another, uncertain which one he was speaking about. One of his disciples, the one Jesus loved, was reclining close beside Jesus. Simon Peter motioned to him to find out who it was he was talking about. So he leaned back against Jesus and asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus replied, "He's the one I give the piece of bread to after I've dipped it." When he had dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas, Simon Iscariot's son. After Judas ate the piece of bread, Satan entered him. So Jesus told him, "What you're doing, do it quickly." None of those reclining at the table knew why he had said this to him. Since Judas kept the money bag, some thought that Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. After receiving the piece of bread, he immediately left, and it was night. When he had left, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Children, I am with you a little while longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so now I tell you, where I am going you cannot come. I give you a new command. Love one another, just as I have loved you. You are also to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another."
Okay, so just kind of first of all, keep in mind where we are in the story here. The disciples have gathered for the Passover supper with Jesus. They don't realize it is the last night of Jesus' life before his crucifixion. But he knows that, and so that's why he's just washed their feet. He's given them that command to serve one another, to humble themselves, and now he is trying to make clear to the disciples that the next few hours are going to be difficult and painful, the worst night of any of their lives, okay? The next few minutes will be the final few minutes before everything literally changes for Jesus and for the disciples. Everything they've been doing for these last 3 years has been preparation for what's about to come in the next few hours and days and months and weeks and years, okay? So I want us to see what happens here, and I want you to see the two different disciples here. We're going to start with Judas. Now, Judas and Peter, which we're going to see in this story, kind of start at the same place from here, but they take different paths. And I want us to look at what it says about our own loyalty to Jesus, okay? So let's look at the situation with Judas first. Jesus says very bluntly something in verse 21. What does he say?
One of you will betray me.
Yeah, truly, truly, I say to you, one of you is going to betray me. And we're told he was troubled in spirit as he said this. What is the disciples' reaction to that statement?
They looked at each other. I didn't know which one it was.
Yeah, they're like, well, like who could this be? If you read Matthew's like, they're looking at Jesus like, is it me? You know, they're like, could it be me? And so Peter, always the leader, leans over to the disciple Jesus loved. And anytime John refers to the disciple Jesus loved, he's talking about himself, okay? If you read the context, it makes clear that he's talking about John there. He's like, John, ask Jesus who he's talking about. And so that's exactly what John does. He asks him, and what does Jesus say?
He's the one that I give the piece of bread to after I have dipped it.
Yeah, so he's the one that I give the piece of bread to, and then he gives it to whom?
Judas.
He gives it to Judas. And what does he tell Judas when he does it?
What you're doing, do it quickly.
Yeah, get on with it. Do what you're going to do. We're told he took the bread, Satan entered him, and he left. The disciples thought Judas was going out maybe to buy some more food or to help the poor. No one but John realized that he was talking about his betrayal here. So Jesus takes this moment to talk to his disciples about what is going to happen next, okay? Look at verses 31 and 32, and I want us to follow this narrative here, then we're going to come back around and try to figure out what it's going to say to us, okay? He says he's going to be glorified through everything that's going to be happening. In other words, he's telling them, I'm going to the cross, going to be lifted up, and by glorifying himself, he's going to bring glory to his Father because he is God. His glorification is going to glorify the Father. So Judas' act of betrayal is going to lead to his glorification, okay? And then verse 33, he explains to them clearly that he's going away. He's told them he's going to be betrayed and glorified, then he's going to go away, and they can't go with him, okay? Now he tells them he wants them to do something once he's gone. He says, I'm giving you a new command. What is it?
Love one another.
Love one another, okay? He tells them to love one another how?
Just as he loved him.
As he has loved them. That's going to be the mark of what?
So,
What does he say? If you do this, by this all people are going to know what in verse 35?
you're my disciple.
That you were my disciple. In other words, the mark of a true disciple is how you love one another. How is this a new command, though? Jesus has been saying this all along. Why is this a new command?
Because he won't be there no longer to teach them. He expects them to do it without him being in their presence. Go out and do it, spread it. You know what I mean?
So what is he about to do?
To
Give
send.
himself up.
He's about to give himself up. And then he said, he doesn't just say love one another. He says love one another how?
As he's loved us.
As he's loved us. So in light of what Jesus is about to do, dying for the sins of the world, what is he saying about how the disciples ought to love one another?
Like he loved it. Like he loved him.
With that same sacrificial kind of love, okay? So he's calling them to follow that example, not just serving one another and humbling themselves, but being willing to give up their very lives for one another. So I want you to think about all of that in context of Judas' betrayal here. How does this command to love one another take on added significance with the fact that Judas is about to betray Jesus? What do you think? What is Judas doing here? as Jesus is telling them this?
He's going to tell the Jews where Jesus,
Yeah,
the Jews who the Son of Man is.
Yeah, I want you to think about the contrast here. Judas is doing exactly the opposite of loving right here, okay? Jesus has already served them, is about to die for them, and Judas is betraying him in the meantime. So remember what we talked about when somebody betrays you. You can't be betrayed by somebody you're not close to. And Jesus has just, we talked about this last week, has just washed out the toe jam from Judas's feet, okay? And so as close as he could possibly be to Judas, and now he's going to betray him. And Jesus is going to die for him, but Judas is going to betray him to make that happen. So I want you to think about that for a moment, because I think it's really important. What do you think caused Judas to betray Jesus like this? Okay, greed. That's definitely one of the motivations. What does Matthew tell us that Judas did this for? What reason? Do you remember? The reason of greed. What did he get for doing this? Yeah, he got money. 30 pieces of silver. Depending on the particular silver, that'd be the equivalent of somewhere between $100 and $400 in our day and age. So, don't get me wrong. You want to give me $100, I'll take it. But in light of betraying your master, it was practically nothing. The one betraying the Lord who created heaven and earth is hardly anything at all, okay? So this simple act of this simple feeling of greed led to the betrayal. That's one of the reasons. Any other reasons you think Judas might have betrayed Jesus
I
here?
think out of fear.
Okay, what do you
I
mean?
know what's about to happen.
Okay,
He knew what was the ultimate thing that was going to happen, but the things that led up to it.
mm-hmm.
He didn't know if they were going to be, beaten, tortured with him.
Okay.
I would be scared.
Yeah. I want you to. I think you're making a good point. That's bringing us to something important here. I think. What was the disciples' expectation of who Jesus was throughout this? Did they see Jesus as the one who was going to go and die for their sins? Was that what they thought of Jesus? What did they think Jesus was going to do?
He'd reign as the king on earth.
Yeah.
Lift Jerusalem up in their lifetime and probably put down Rome.
Yeah, that's really what they were thinking. They had no expectation that Jesus was going to come and die for their sins. That wasn't what they were thinking about. They were thinking about a Jesus who would come and he would reign and rule, kick out the Roman Empire from Jerusalem, and he would take over as the King of Kings. Okay, that's the expectation that they had. Now Jesus comes and he starts talking about, I'm going to die and I'm going to go away. What do you think? As the disciples are beginning to hear that, specifically Judas, what do you think he may be thinking right here?
It's a joke,
Okay.
It's not, because it kind of makes you think a lack of faith after what he'd done. Did he truly believe all the stuff Jesus was telling him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. His expectations were one thing, and now what is Jesus telling him?
He's dying.
Yeah, the complete opposite. Yeah, that he's going to die. Okay, and so Jesus is not meeting his expectations, and so I think those are the two big reasons that Judas betrays Jesus here. Number one is greed. Okay, and number two is not having his expectations met. And so what I want you to think about is this: we're all tempted to turn our backs on Jesus for both of those same reasons, okay? As Christians today, how are we tempted to betray Jesus because of money, do you think? How does greed do that?
You would do anything for it.
Okay?
They just get it in their head and that's what they want. They'll do anything for it.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of believers who are chasing money and success rather than Jesus. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, you got to have money to survive. So, when sometimes we don't want to tithe, instead of, we could spend it on something else that's, useful to us, that's taking money away from God, we're putting money first.
Yeah. And what did Jesus say about God and money? Y'all remember what he said in the Sermon on the Mount?
Have control of it.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, he said you can't serve both. He said you'll either love one and hate the other, or hate one and love the other. But you can't serve both God and money. But the average professing Christian in America is chasing the same kind of monetary things that the average non-believer is chasing. Okay, if you are a believer, let me say this: And this is something really important as you're young to get through your heads, because if you don't deal with this right now in your life, you're going to get to a place where you're older and you get comfortable, and it's going to be even harder. Okay, so you're in your 20s. Most of you don't have much anyway, so this is a good time to start learning this. All right, before you have stuff. If you are a believer, you should not have the same lifestyle as other people your age and your income bracket. You just shouldn't. There's two reasons for that. Number one, because everybody in your age and income bracket is deeply in debt. Okay? So you shouldn't have it for that reason. And number two, your generosity should prevent you from living the same lifestyle as other people in your tax bracket. Okay? I can't tell you how much to give past. I believe you should tithe on your income, but you should be overly generous with your money. There are some things there should be things that you cannot do because you are giving away too much of your money. That's what it looks like to not have your money as your guide. Okay, and that's a great way to do that. So stop convincing yourself that you have to have the same stuff as everybody else who's your age. All right, or the problem a lot of times, I can remember when I was your age, my thought was not that I needed to have the same stuff as everybody my age. It was I wanted to have the same lifestyle as people who were much older than me, who had spent long time working to get that lifestyle, and it's not possible. Okay, without going into a lot of debt. And to do that is to make money your God. And to make money your God is to do the same thing that Judas did here. To betray him for what's really not worth anything. Okay, Judas did it for 30 pieces of silver, which wasn't much. And there is nothing that you can gain in this world from a monetary standpoint that is worth sacrificing Jesus for it. Okay? All right, so first thing I think we need to guard against if we don't want to fall in the same trap Judas did is greed. What are some ways that Christians are tempted to portray Jesus by having the wrong expectations of him, like Judas did?
Flipping some of his scriptures, like what's that one that everybody, the one everybody uses for sports and stuff that ain't
I can
really,
do all things through Christ who
really got nothing
strengthens
to do with
me.
sport, yeah.
That's not me. That doesn't mean you're going to get an extra 10 miles an hour on your fastball, right? Yeah, so I think that's, absolutely. What else?
They expect him to kind of fold into their worldly choices.
Yeah, so I have these things that I want to do, and I just assume Jesus approves of
Or I
them.
want to be somebody else, and God made me like this kind of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe they expected if they followed Jesus, he'd solve all their problems. That's not really how it works. As a matter of fact, Jesus said, in this world you'll have trouble. You may have more problems for following Jesus, okay? That does happen. Maybe they thought that he would bless their family or their finances or their health. And sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't. He has bigger things in mind than just your finances or your health or your family. He's looking at you from an eternal perspective. Maybe they thought they'd never have to deal with pain or loss anymore. And when that happens, they walk away from Jesus. But we must never let our messed up expectations of who Jesus is supposed to be to us cause us to betray him. That's exactly what Judas did here. But we need to understand that Jesus has something better for us. Here's the point. Judas' choice was not an uncommon choice. We look at Judas' choice here to betray Jesus and we think, how could we do that? People do it every single day. People who claim to follow Jesus decide to betray him and turn their back on him instead. Here's the truth. Don't literally do this, but in your mind, you look around this room, you can think about people who are in here most weeks. Maybe they're not here today for some reason. There's a really good chance that some portion of you are going to walk away from Jesus at some point. How do I know that? Because I've been teaching Sunday school for a long time. And I see people who've done just that, who've made these same choices that Judas made. They've chosen money over Jesus. They've had their expectations about who Jesus was messed up, and so they've walked away from him. And you need to make the decision now that I'm going to follow Jesus no matter what. I'm going to do no matter what it takes. I'm going to continue to stick with him, okay? And because the danger for you is the same danger as Judas. He walked with Jesus for 3 years. He saw everything. He experienced everything, just like the rest of the disciples did. And he still betrayed him. And so you have to guard against that, okay? Anybody want to add anything to that? Questions before we move on? That's a sober thing for you to think about, but I've been teaching Sunday school for 20 years now, okay? And I've watched person after person who I thought were walking close with Jesus walk away. And you don't want to be that, okay? All right, let's read a little further. Somebody read verses 31 through 38 for me.
Therefore, when he was gone out, Jesus said, Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God be glorified in him, God shall also glorify him in himself, and shall straightway glorify him. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. Ye shall seek me, and as I said unto the Jews, Whither I go, ye cannot come. So now I say unto you, a new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, and ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Simon Peter said unto him, Lord, whither thou goest? Jesus answered unto him, Whither I go, thou canst not follow me now, but thou shalt follow me afterwards. Peter said unto him, Lord, why can I not follow thee now? I will lay down my life for thy sake. Jesus answered him, Wilt thou lay down thy life for my sake? Verily, verily, I say unto thee, the cock shall not crow till thou hast denied me thrice.
Okay, I asked you to read verses 31 after we'd already read it. That was mine. But anyway, let's look at verses 36 through 38, okay? And Jesus tells them that he's going away and they can't follow him. The disciples should understand this question, what he's saying here. They should understand what he means by the fact that he's going away, but they don't understand it. They obviously don't. And Peter asks him a question. What is that question in verse 36?
Lord, why can I not follow you now?
Yeah, Lord, where are you going? Why can't I follow you? And what is Jesus' answer to him in verse 36?
Where I'm going, you cannot follow.
Yeah, where I'm going, you can't follow me now, but what?
But you will follow me afterwards.
You will follow me afterwards. In other words, I'm about to die. I'm about to die on the cross. You're not now. You can't go with me, but you'll follow me afterwards. And Jesus meant that literally. Peter will eventually die in the same manner that Jesus did. Nero will crucify Peter. About 35 years later, Peter dies on a cross too. Peter asked to be crucified upside down because he said he didn't believe he was worthy to be crucified in the same way that his Savior was. But that's exactly what happens, okay? But that is not his attitude at this moment. What is his reaction when Jesus says, you can't go with me right now?
I will lay down my life for you.
Why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. What is Jesus' response to Peter there?
Will you truly do that? Like, he's questioning him.
Yeah, he said, will you lay your life down for me? Really? And and then he tells him what he's going to do. What does he say he's going to do?
Deny him 3 times before the rooster.
Yeah, you will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows in the next morning. Okay, so before the sun comes up, you're going to deny me 3 times. Peter is standing here, and he is the height of confidence and arrogance here. I will lay down my life for you. And not long after that, we see him lying to a slave girl about his connection to Jesus, okay? So Jesus knows that Peter is going to completely abandon him and deny that he even knows him before the sun even comes up. Now, there are a couple of things I want you to see from this short conversation here, okay? And they both deal with how you might end up denying Jesus too, okay? How would you describe Peter's attitude here in this moment of this conversation where he says, I will lay down my life for you? How would you describe his attitude?
I think he just wanted to hear. I think he wanted Jesus to hear him say that, like just to, like, look, I got your back. But truly, he did. He really did.
Yeah.
Kind of just let make himself feel good in a way.
Okay.
In the safety of that room, he's like, I'll do anything for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The safety of the room is really important right there, right? Yeah, absolutely. What else? What do you think about Peter's attitude here?
I think he's getting ahead of himself.
Yeah, showing a little overconfidence here, right? He is certain, so certain that he would die for him. He is certain of who he is and what he will do when it comes down to it. He knows that he would never turn his back on Jesus. Maybe Judas would do it, but not he, not Peter, okay? But he wasn't prepared for what was about to happen, and when the time came, that's exactly what he did. He turned his back on Jesus. He denied him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So I want you to think about this right now. When I said just a moment ago that you need to guard against the possibility that you would walk away from Jesus, the danger is saying, not me. I would never do that. But each of us has something inside of us that could tempt us toward that right now, that could eventually take us away from Jesus. And I want you to guard against this temptation to overconfidence. Right now you're like, shh, look at me, I'm in LifeGroup at 9 o'clock on the day the time changed. I am sticking with Jesus no matter what. But a time of testing is going to come, and a real test, not just are you going to get up an hour early, okay? A real time of testing. And if you don't prepare yourself for it, you might do the same thing that Peter did here. You might deny Jesus, okay? What do you think the temptations are that cause us to deny Jesus?
I mean, like, and this is probably extreme, but you look at the school shootings, and when they, ask them, do you believe in God? And if you say yes, you're going to meet him. That would be hard.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Hope none of us have to.
Yeah, but that was just,
Mhm.
I just remember the Columbine shooting.
Anybody else?
I guess people being in agreeing with somebody's sin, and then they ask what do you think of it, and you agree with it, but true, that's not what God stands for. You're not kind of standing what He believes in.
Yeah.
Because you're scared to hurt their feelings. You just want to be on their side. You want to keep them happier. Instead of standing for what's right.
Yeah. What might lead to you being overconfident about this? Like Peter?
When you get further into the Word, you kind of feel like you just bulletproof.
Yeah. Matter of fact, being close to Jesus may be the thing that makes you overconfident. I'm in church every Sunday. I'm in LifeGroup. I'm doing a D group. I'm studying the Word. I will never walk away from Jesus. Peter had been with Jesus for 3 years, and he was convinced that he would never turn his back on Jesus. He would die for Jesus if he had to. But all of us have a little something called our sin nature. And that sin nature in the moment of testing could cause us to deny Jesus. And so your only chance when that time comes is not to trust in your own faith or your own abilities, but to completely trust in Jesus instead. He'll help you, but you have to recognize that you can't do it on your own, okay? And you have to prepare yourself for that possibility that the time of testing is going to come that I'm not going to be able to do it on my own. See, we live in a culture where I know people like to talk about persecution of the church and things like that, and how we have to deal with people who disagree with us and things like that. That's true. But y'all sitting in a very comfortable climate-controlled room right now, and you can comfortably talk about Jesus, and you'll go into another comfortable climate-controlled room in a few minutes from now, and you're going to sing with several hundred other people, and you're going to sit there with several hundred other people who believe just like you. And so whatever happens the rest of the week, you got that, okay? And so it could lead to an overconfidence, all right? And a real time of testing could come at some point, will come at some point. And during that moment is when you're going to need to be prepared, not to do it because everybody else is doing it, but what are you going to do when nobody else is doing it? Okay? And so that's what you need to prepare yourselves and your hearts and your minds for right now. So when the time came, why do you think Peter denied Jesus? How did he change so quickly?
He was afraid of what would happen to him.
Yeah, he was afraid. He feared for his life. He feared for the consequences of following and claiming Jesus as his master. And this will cause you to deny Jesus too. What are some of the things that we might fear that would cause us to deny Jesus?
Persecution.
Okay, persecution, absolutely. Be fear that we'll be rejected because of our faith. What else?
I think on a much smaller scale, it can be hard when you're in a room full of unbelievers to admit, like, if you even bring that up or say anything, it's sometimes easier to be quiet
Yeah.
versus saying anything. You might not necessarily outright deny him, but to just kind of tuck your face and then not say anything.
Yeah.
Would be easier.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Y'all know I haven't always been a pastor. I've been in those places too. Worked in places where it can be difficult sometimes to even mention it, when everybody's talking about other things and it's just not what anybody else is thinking about. Absolutely. What are other things that why does that make us afraid, do you think? Rejection. Yeah, that's exactly right. We're afraid that we're going to be rejected by people that we want to be accepted by. Those people who you work with them every day and you're around them all the time, you want to feel accepted by them. You don't want to be the outcast in the group, right? You don't want to be rejected. You don't want to lose status. But I'm afraid to tell you that being a believer will sometimes cost you your status, okay? And that's okay because it's worth it. And that's what I want you to understand this morning. There is nothing to truly be afraid of in following Jesus. There is nothing that you are afraid of that is worth denying Jesus over. Okay? You don't have to fear anything about this life. You don't have to have any fear in death. It has lost its sting. You don't have to fear hurt or pain. Jesus promises that ultimately he's going to take away every pain and every hurt in the end. That doesn't mean you're not going to have hard times. You are going to have hard times sometimes, but the hard times are easier with Jesus in them, okay? You're going to deal with people, and people are going to hurt you, and they're going to do bad things to you, and sometimes people are going to abandon you and betray you, but the promise of Jesus is that he's never going to do that. You don't have to worry about that. He's always worth following. Never should you need to betray or deny him. Even as life gets hard, you can trust him, okay? You can trust that no matter what's happening in your life, that he's going to work everything out for your good, for his glory, and that it will be worth it. Nobody at the end of their life who is a believer sits back and thinks, man, I just wish I'd walked away from Jesus a long time ago. This wasn't worth it, okay? There are a lot of people who do and look back on their lives with a great deal of regret, and you don't want to be one of those people, okay? There are lots of people your age who are making that decision right now to give up on him, and then they go on to regret it later in life. When I was some of y'all are younger than I was. And some of y'all are kind of in that place where I was when I got back into church. But from about 18 to 25, I walked away from Jesus. And I look back on those 7 or 8 years as my biggest regrets in my whole life. Okay, so stick with him now. It will be worth it in the end. He's going to stick with you. Okay, and so what I want you to see is I want you to be encouraged. I don't want you to be afraid. Jesus doesn't abandon even those who abandon him. Even if you have betrayed him or denied him, what is Jesus going to do to Peter just a few days from now? I remember?
Kiss him.
Yeah, he's going to kiss him. He's going to restore him. We go back to the end of this book, the last chapter of John, and we're going to see Jesus restoring Peter to the place that he was and making him one of the leaders of the early church. So Jesus forgives. He's graceful. You get to that place, you're around those people who aren't believers, and you don't stand up like you wish you had. You don't have to make yourself feel bad. You just have to ask Jesus to forgive you, and he'll restore you, okay? The choice is yours, though. You can make the choices that Peter and Judas made in those times of testing, or you can make a different choice. God will empower you to make the right choice, but you need to prepare yourself that a time of testing is going to come if it hasn't already. And when that time comes, not by my own power am I going to stand up, but I'm going to do what I need to do by the power of the Holy Spirit inside me. Okay? All right, anybody want to add anything else? Anybody have any questions about this text or anything we've said today? All right, well, let's close in prayer. Rob, you wanna close us?
Yep. Dear Lord, thank you for this day and thank you for the opportunity to come here and to hear your word. Lord, and just pray for everyone that's not here today. Pray that you bring them back safe and pray that you watch over us this week. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, announcements y'all know of this morning?